Welcome to World Cup Nomad. I am the World Cup Nomad. My name is Steve Mascord, and there's some fireworks going off in front of us, and I don't know if it's like a Chinese restaurant or it's because we're at the quarterfinals here at the Rugby League World Cup, and it's quite a nice view of John Smith Stadium, where Australia in 1 hour are taking on Lebanon. And but I haven't just kind of had a lazy afternoon. We came from London, and I've got Brad Walter here, a good friend of the show. I'll let him describe the journey. How was the journey?
Scenic.
I would have gone for long, but scenic. So what were some of the sights you saw on the way up here?
Pall Mall, Hyde Park. It was like a scenic tour of London, then onto the motorway, and then some country lanes somewhere about half an hour out of Huddersfield.
Yeah, so when we were sort of 20 minutes from Huddersfield an hour before we got here, because I kept taking wrong turns. I'll take responsibility for it. I kept taking wrong turns.
I think those fireworks that will welcome us.
They are. So I'm not going to talk for long. You know how this goes. But just a quick word last night, Brad, on the wheelchair. The wheelchair games we saw in London, and the reason that we put ourselves through this torture all afternoon.
It was epic, wasn't it? It was brutal. It was you just couldn't look away. It was. I think you mentioned there's like a highlight every 30 seconds. And the reaction has been so positive. The fact that the wheelchair rugby league has been on BBC and so many people have been exposed to it. I think this World Cup will do for the wheelchair what the last World Cup did for women's rugby league.
And the big question, whoa. Was it worth, we almost get by car just then to finish off our afternoon, was it worth what we just put ourselves through?
Yeah, absolutely, although I am now weighing up whether I'm going to do it again. I drive to London and back.
Okay, we'll see you inside the stadium, people. So now leaving the ground, walking down the street that I walked down with Brad Walter about 3 hours ago, and it was a 48-4 win for Australia over Lebanon. And look, there were 8,500 people there, and it was a somewhat flat occasion. There was a vibe of just getting a job done from the point of view of the Aussies, and for Lebanon, the end of a pretty handy campaign. But obviously they were never really at the races, as a score would indicate. And I guess as I walk along this northern street, quintessentially northern street, the question is, the men's. I think if you're going to judge the World Cups individually, the men's World Cup as a success or otherwise hangs in the balance. There's been some good aspects of it, Jamaica, Greece, etc., and making their debuts and all those sort of nice, feel-good, warm and fuzzy stories. But the Aussies are the game's biggest stars, and this is the birthplace of rugby league, and there were only 8,500 people there tonight. And as someone said on Twitter, you could get in for 20 quid. It's the cost of a pizza. So, you've really got to ask questions about the state of the game and about the success of this tournament, given that. There's some sort of disconnect there. I don't know what it is. I know that Huddersfield don't draw big crowds anyway, so even though this is a birthplace of rugby league, it's not a particularly big rugby league hotbed. But the Aussies didn't draw well in St Helens either. They didn't draw well in Coventry. You got to also wonder whether if two NRL sides had played this, would they have drawn better? And if they would have, then is that how we should be focusing? Should we be just marketing rugby league in this country via the NRL and not via international rugby league? Is international rugby league something that should be just flogged off to third-party countries, financed by governments, staged for TV? I don't know. But I think if you want to look at the World Cup in terms of the whole event, then I think the turning point, the pivot point, was last night with the vibe around the wheelchair rugby league when Austin Healey, the England Rugby Union winger, is tweeting how impressed he was, then you've got a victory, right? So, as I said recently, men's rugby league might be just old rugby league for, an ageing population in a couple of areas of the world. And women's rugby league and wheelchair rugby league might be new, dynamic sports that aren't restricted by, the burden of history and class warfare. Anyway, that's my monologue on a cold Friday night in the birthplace of rugby league. Tomorrow it's Wigan, and I'll have to get there reasonably early for England versus Canada in the women. That's at midday, so that means it's an hour from here. Press Centre opens at 10, leave at 9. Sounds good to me. And then a full-time dashing to the car and coming back across the Pennines and heading off to see Hull. Or to see, I've seen Hull, but to be in Hull for Fiji versus New Zealand. Let's see if we can get an upset this weekend, eh? Talk to you tomorrow.